tengo el gusto de presentarles a una persona muy querida en la comunidad, nuestra representante por el Distrito 14 Congresional de Nueva York, representando una parte de Queens y Bronx, apoyando políticas congresivas. Recibamos con un fuerte aplauso a la congresista Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Okay. I'm glad to be here today to represent our representative for the 14th Congressional District, representing parts of the Bronx and Queens. Please give a large round of applause for Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Hola a todos, bienvenidos, salamu alaikum. The great thing about bilingual and multilingual town halls is that everyone gets an applause twice, so who wouldn't love that? I'm just so thankful to be here and, you know, as Nula was saying, to have this room packed. Standing room for us to figure out our path forward and rally and organize around our path forward to advance education, not only as a right, but as a blessing and as one of the greatest gems of public good in the United States and the world. I wanted to quickly share with you all my story, because a lot of people don't know that my story and my organizing in New York started with education organizing. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that. And it started because of my story. So a lot of people, you know, may know I was born in the Bronx in the late 80s and early 90s. And that's right, BX, always, all day. And so my mom was, you know, my mom and my dad were two young parents in their 20s. My dad was starting a small business in the Bronx. My mom had just moved here from Puerto Rico, and she was learning English while she was raising me at the same time. And my parents, they felt like they had to choose between their community and a quality school, a quality public school. That's how they felt back then in the late 80s and early 90s. And so they felt confronted with this choice that we still see today, 30 years later, where parents are made to feel like they're in a position where they need to choose between the community that they love or to go to another place where they feel like their child will have a better shot. And so given that set of incentives, my parents did move. My parents moved. My father didn't want to, because my father was a Bronx boy, born and raised. And so I moved, and our whole family chipped in for a down payment about 30, 40 minutes north in Westchester. And as a child, I spoke Spanish first. Spanish was my first language. And I went to a school where no one looked like me. I went to a school where teachers thought I needed remedial education because I spoke two languages instead of one. And it wasn't until I took a high-stakes test where I scored in the 99th percentile across the board that they figured out that I did not need remedial education. It took a test instead of understanding the child in front of them. And so that was what I grew up with. I grew up with being told in school that I needed to learn how to speak American. I grew up in a school that did not understand that I'll never forget. You know, there were so many moments. Even in high school, we were learning American history, and the teachers said, you know, they talked about assimilation versus pluralism. And they said, who here believes that in America everyone should assimilate to the same culture? And everyone raised their hand. And they said, who here believes that we should all maintain our own cultures and who we are and you know, coexist and be one nation? And I was the only one who raised my hand. I remember how that made me feel. And I remember how that wasn't just about feeling or identity. It's about how we value ourselves and who we are taught to value in America. And so I graduated And I went to college. I was the first in my family to go to college on my mom's side. But as I was in college, I started to really reflect on my experiences. And I saw that while my parents did everything in their power to do what they needed to do to me, for me, and for my younger brother, they should have never been responding to those incentives in the first place. They should have never, ever been set up to respond to, they should have never felt that their public school wasn't good enough in the first place. They should have never been made to feel like somewhere else was better than who they were in the first place. And I should have never been made to feel that being bilingual was a deficit in the first place. And so what I did was that after I graduated college, I said, we need to turn the ship around. And I moved back to the neighborhood where I was born, in the Bronx. And I was working out of Hunts Point, because by that time, my cousin, because we all grew up around all these cousins, that's the culture here. So I was separated from my family in a lot of ways. And I went back, and my cousins who were my age had completely different outcomes than I had. And so my cousin at 19 had his beloved daughter, and that was my goddaughter. And now I felt like I needed to navigate the same perverse incentives that my parents had to respond to 30 years prior, and that's not right. That's not right. So what that told me is that this issue is structural and it is systemic, which means we need a solution, just like with the Green New Deal, we need a solution on the scale of the problem. So I came back and I saw what was going on. And I saw that instead of being incentivized to go an hour north to a public school somewhere else, now we're being incentivized to enroll in a charter school, because the public schools in Hunts Point didn't feel good enough to my cousin. And I agree with Jessica, but we should never feel that way about our public schools. We should never feel that way. And the moment we start feeling that way is when we should start fighting to improve them, not to reject them. And so I'm so glad to hear this organizing and to hear from the perspectives of the community and the folks who know best, the parents, the advocates, the educational organizers, and to take those solutions to Washington, D.C. And I know I have just a minute left, but I wanted to put this note out there as well. Because a lot, we hear over and over again that education obviously is profoundly important. It is the engine of social growth and social development in the United States. It is education is one of the key engines of ending inequity. And so I sit on, one of the committees that I sit on is the Committee for Financial Services in DC. And so we recently had a hearing on the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's like, where are we going with this? So I sit there, and right now the Trump administration is gutting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is what was set up after the 2008 crisis, after the 2008 recession. They're taking out all the professionals that are educated enough and experts enough to protect us against predatory foreclosures, predatory mortgages, lending, foreclosures, auto loans, and we're seeing it on the rise again. And they're taking all of the frontline protectors and policy protectors to protect us against predatory lending, and they're putting in political appointments. So I asked, where are these political appointments coming from? They're coming from the Department of Education and Betsy DeVos. Because student loans and hedge funds profiting off of charter schools and all this stuff go straight into Wall Street incentives. And so we need to understand that education organizing and the DOE right now is a nexus that is infecting a lot of other agencies. They are the source. It goes into our foreign policy because we're talking about the same family that is working with private military and so on. And so this is a nexus. This is a nexus. And what we need to do is realize the scale of the problem and organize our hearts out. Because it's not gonna come from just one vote. And it's not just gonna come from the Congresswoman in New York's 14th district. This needs to be a national movement where we realize our agency. And the good news is that it's already started. We saw it with the West Virginia teacher strikes. We saw it in LA. We're seeing it all over the country. And as much as these strikes and these actions aren't getting a ton of national attention, they're still happening anyway. And to that, I just want to say, do not deter. Because bilingual education is a right. Because our schools work best and our policy works best when it is informed by the experiences of parents. Our schools work best when they validate the identities of children. That's why we need halal food in public schools. That's why we need it. That's why we need it, because we're telling every single person, you matter. You matter. We're not going to make you, down to the things you eat, we are not going to make you be invalidated. We are going to validate every aspect of who you are, the language you speak, the food you eat, what you believe, how you pray, because that is what America is actually about. And so, I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you all again, because the people who, our job is to serve you. That's what our job is. And so when we get together in these rooms, you, in my opinion, and that's why I want to express gratitude, because you are telling me how I can best serve you. And that is what this is all about. So I want to thank you all again. And if there's so many people in this room, if you're fired up and you're not involved with these folks, get involved with them before you leave. That's the way we're going to change things. So just want to thank you all again, and I'll hand it back to our organizers. Thank you, guys.